views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren, Jaime, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our Bronx community. Coming up, we'll learn about a multi-service agency providing emergency food, social services, and legal representation right here in our borough. Then also, we'll talk about how the COVID-19 Emergency Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Act is going forward and what to expect. Later, we'll discuss the Center for Employment Opportunities on how they're providing employment services for recently incarcerated individuals. And then finally, we'll learn about a community building organization advancing veterans as well as families as civic leaders in New York City and beyond. So we encourage you to stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open. Today is Wednesday, January 6th. It's the first Wednesday of the new year, so we're here to tell you Happy New Year. You're watching Open, a live and interactive program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. We also want to welcome our viewers who are watching on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, MNN's channel, as Open is being broadcast live simultaneously on the MNN channel. We also invite you to stay connected to us on all of our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Well, a lot has been going on as of late. Can't take you through everything, but we can take you through some things with our Bronx updates. We start off today with coronavirus news. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio making the announcement that the city will start with the goal of reaching 1 million New Yorkers with a dose of the coronavirus vaccine throughout January. The city's health department aims to set up 250 or more locations citywide, including vaccine hubs in areas hardest hit by the coronavirus that can give out 45,000 doses in a single day. Following the vaccination announcement, Governor Andrew Cuomo also stated he will not be getting the coronavirus vaccination until it's available for disenfranchised communities who were hit hard by the pandemic. The governor stated, quote, "Race or income will not determine who lives and who dies. And I mean it, but I will not take the vaccine until the vaccine is available for my group in the Black, Hispanic, and poor communities around the United States." In other news, with the COVID-19 vaccine finally here, the workload is increasing for distribution centers as well as hospitals that are actually looking to store the vaccine. Our BronxNet reporter Jericho Tran brings us the story on how they're keeping up.
After months of waiting, the COVID-19 vaccine is finally here, but the work is just starting for distribution centers and hospitals looking to store the vaccine.
The vaccine process is a complicated process, and the distribution is going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort.
Governor Cuomo unboxed the Pfizer vaccine during one of his press briefings to reveal the complicated process behind storing the COVID-19 vaccine. Each vaccine package comes with a geo-tracker GPS device and a monitor to track the temperature of each box. Inside each box, trays are wrapped in dry ice in order to maintain the ultra-cold temperature. Once hospitals receive the box, they must replace the dry ice and continue to replace that ice every 5 days. Christopher Amato works at Armato Ice, a dry ice and firewood service in the Bronx. He tells us some of the challenges hospitals are facing now as the need to distribute the vaccine increases.
Dry ice is going to be needed right now for all the hospitals that do not have these special freezers that are in place yet. everything is on back order because the whole world is looking for those freezers.
Each box contains about 5,000 vaccines. Glass vials of the vaccine lay underneath the dry ice, and each vial contains 5 doses of the vaccine. A diluting liquid comes with each bottle of the vaccine to dilute the vial before the vaccine is administered. One tray holds up to 195 vials. Each package holds about 5 trays. In order to distribute the dry ice needed for these boxes, Armando begins his day at 6 a.m. when he loads up his trucks with dry ice, preparing to deliver the ice to each hospital, as well as any other deliveries he has scheduled for that day.
We definitely have seen an increase in deliveries and dry ice that's needed.
In order to maintain the temperature, the box can only be opened twice a day for 60 to 90 seconds each time. Each vial is frozen before the vaccine is administered and needs to be thawed at room temperature for about 30 minutes. The vial must then stand for 2 hours once it has been diluted. The vial has 6 hours to be administered. Around for almost 100 years, throughout 4 generations, Armando welcomes any new customers looking to fill dry ice orders.
Anybody that needs our services, we're available, and we're ready to do our part and help out and fight this awful disease.
And after this complicated process has run its course, patients must return within 21 days to receive a second dosage of the vaccine.
The vaccine really isn't effective until after the second dosage.
The Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines will be administered to New Yorkers in phases. The first phase of the COVID-19 vaccine distribution starts with high-risk hospital workers, ICU staff, nursing home residents and staff, as well as other healthcare workers. Reporting for BronxNet, Jericho Tran.
Thank you, Jericho. That's all the time we have for our Bronx updates. We want you to stay with us. We got a full show coming up. Open will return right after this. Welcome back to the show. Part of the solution is a multi-service agency that's actually nourishing the basic needs and hunger of all those who come through its doors. The agency assists low-income families and individuals, and since 1982 has grown to become a leading provider of emergency food, social services, and legal representation in the borough of the Bronx. Now, POT services address the varying issues and complexities accompanying poverty by helping clients find stability across areas such as financial well-being, health, education, housing, and also day-to-day needs. And with the COVID-19 pandemic affecting housing and food insecurity, the question is, what initiatives are being taken to actually help those in need? We're pleased to be joined this morning by the the executive director of Part of the Solution, POTS, Christina Hanson. And Christina, good to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so
and
happy
Happy
to be
New Year
here.
to you.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this here. I mean, as we go into 2021, obviously, some of those needs do carry over. We want it to be a new year, but the needs and food insecurity, unfortunately, is going to be a need that's going to be saddled with many people in 2021. And talk to me a little bit about POTS and the work that you're doing to really deal with that issue of food insecurity.
Absolutely, yes. Food insecurity was already a challenge in the Bronx prior to the pandemic, and it's something that we were addressing every day. In our community, 48% of families with children live below the poverty line, even before a major disruption happened like that of the pandemic. And this year, it became an even bigger challenge for our community because of how many people lost their jobs who work in the Bronx because of the pandemic. And so throughout, POTS has been serving additional food. So we have been working hard since we never shut our doors. We've been open the entire time, providing food for our food pantry. So we provide bags of food for people to cook at home. And then we also provide prepared meals for people to take to eat. And we used to serve those inside the building. Now we do it at the door, but it's still high quality, delicious, nutritious food. And this year we served over 2 million meals. So 2020, we served more than 2 million meals into our local community, whereas in past years, the highest number we'd ever served was around 1 million meals. So we more than doubled our food output this year.
How have you been able to manage, given the fact that you have had this increased need? When you talk about providing services, the need for more personnel and doing that, what's it been like for you guys? Have you been overwhelmed to the place with personnel and volunteers and having to do this?
So we did have to make a lot of changes. Some personnel we sort of shifted some of our resources to the food program, and then we also did some hiring. So during the pandemic, unlike a lot of other places, we actually hired new staff and we expanded there. And then volunteer-wise, we've had fewer because we're trying to manage social distancing, and because a lot of school groups and business groups and church groups no longer can volunteer. But we have had quite a number of incredibly dedicated individual volunteers who've been so helpful.
I want to look at some of the numbers that we recently got concerning your organization. We know that 1,500 children and adults received back-to-school supplies, Thanksgiving turkeys, and holiday gifts, and over 843 households received legal representation, and the clinic prevented 430 households from being evicted. The reason I focus on the latter is given the fact that we're now in 2021, we know what's happening with residential and the potential for residential evictions once this moratorium is over. Talk to us about that and some of the work that you've been doing in this legal representation, particularly in the area of eviction.
Absolutely, yes. We're very concerned about what is to come around eviction. I do know that it sounds like they've expanded the moratorium, but there's still, even if the moratorium is expanded, people still need to come up with those funds to pay rent. And it's unclear to us how that happens without additional support. So POTS has a team of people who will assist those who have rent arrears, either access funds from the government, or we have a little bit ourselves that we can help with. And we also help when Bronx Housing Court is open. We have attorneys who will help argue the case in housing court on behalf of clients. And that's something that we've had to be very creative about this year, how to manage that process, because often when we're supporting people to keep their homes, we know that they have the future ability to pay, but because unemployment has been such a challenge, that's something that's become much harder to prove because maybe people haven't gotten their jobs yet back. But even so, our staff has been dedicated in terms of helping find all the resources that they can for clients who come to us and trying to figure out to resolve their cases and ensure that we continue to prevent evictions in our community, because it's something that's so important to keep people in their homes.
And I know you do a lot of, impactful work, and we've talked about some of the work that you actually do, but we know that you can't do it without raising funds. I know you had a virtual fundraiser not too long ago. Talk to us about that and the success of that.
Yes, we did our first ever virtual fundraiser. We got to become TV producers, which is
Welcome
definitely
to the world.
yeah, was surprising to me. But anyway, so we held our fundraiser, Helping the Bronx Bounce Back, virtually in October, and the idea was that we've been able to. We've been here doing a lot for the Bronx, but also community members of the Bronx have been doing a lot for each other during this time, raising funds when they have it and others don't, helping assist those who are homebound. For example, we've had a lot of people who will support their neighbors who are elderly and can't leave their homes. So people have been helping each other. And we wanted to highlight all of that resilience that we've seen. And it was a successful event. We were so happy because we often have in-person events. And this is the first time we'd done a virtual one. And we were so happy and so pleased to see how well people in the community responded and how much they wanted to support the work that we're doing.
Yeah. And all that you saw last year, what was the biggest thing that probably surprised you the most, given the fact that COVID-19 has shaken so much of New York State and particularly New York City?
I guess, some of the stuff that has surprised me is around, I didn't realize how quickly and how fast people were going to lose their employment. I mean, it was 2 weeks in March and suddenly I feel like half the Bronx was unemployed. The idea that people were unable to keep on staff for any period of time at all, to have any sort of transition period for anyone, and just how quickly, our economy basically says to people, you're not valuable to us, go away. And the kind of impacts that sort of very fast turnaround can have on communities. I just didn't anticipate that.
Yeah.
And that was hard to see.
But on the flip side of that, you have 107 full or part-time jobs that were secured through POTS workforce development, and 156 people were connected to job training services. So even though that rocked you, I guess on the other side, you were also able to handle it of some sort.
Yes, absolutely. So fortunately, there are still places where there is growth in jobs. One place, for example, is Hunts Point and delivery workers. Both of those increased during the pandemic. And then there has been an increase in jobs in our community. So being able to help people brush up their resumes, get their interview skills together, figure out how to handle this virtual world. Interviewing has become completely different now than it used to be, but it's still possible for people to interview and get jobs. So we're so fortunate to be able to help people with that process.
Yeah. And then I also know that in this season of COVID-19 that we're still trying to navigate that. POTS is also very instrumental in making masks. And so tell us a little bit about the mask making and how people can participate in the masks.
Yes, so we had a campaign where people could make and send masks to us, and then we would distribute them to the community. That was really great fun, getting all the different styles that people created to hand them out. For a while there, it was very difficult to get masks here in the Bronx, as was anywhere. And so we were so glad to be able to help promote the health of our community by providing those masks, and to be able to connect with people who wanted to assist by making those masks. So we were so thankful for that campaign. And you're still welcome to send them here, and we can distribute them to our neighbors who are looking for them.
Well, Christina, I want to thank you so much for being with us here on Open and continuing the impactful work that POTS is doing and really bridging the gap during some real troubled times. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Daren. I appreciate it.
All righty, Christina Hanson from POTS. Now, if you want more information about POTS, you can visit their website at potsbronx.org. Once again, it's potsbronx.org. And then you can also follow them on social media at potsbronx. We encourage you, don't go anywhere. We've got more Open continuing. We'll be right back right after this. And welcome back to the show. A recent rent moratorium took place in effect in 2020, but the ban will last at least until May the 1st. The COVID-19 Emergency Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Act is one of many coronavirus-related bills that the state legislature and New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo created amidst the pandemic turmoil. The new bill will help to ensure New York tenants, homeowners, and small landlords will not have to fear being kicked out of their homes if they've been impacted by the pandemic and economic crisis. But the question is, what can tenants actually expect, as well as what can homeowners expect moving forward? Here to tell us more is the partner at David A. Gallo and Associates, Robert M. Link, and we're pleased to have Robert back with us again. And Robert, Happy New Year. Good to have you.
Happy New Year, Daren. Good to be here. Thank you.
As I said a few seconds ago, we bring old baggage into the new year. And for some, when we talk about this moratorium, it works well for some, and it really is a challenge for others, particularly landlords. If you're a landlord and you really have to deal with this moratorium that's now in effect at least until May the 1st, how do you survive?
Well, if you're a landlord, you got a decision to make. Do you want to take advantage of this narrow opportunity that the legislature is allowing you to evict? You have to personally serve the hardship declaration form on your tenant with your rent demand or with your 30 or 60 or 90-day notice to terminate the tenancy. And you have to allow them an opportunity to interpose this hardship declaration to stay the eviction process until May 1st. And what this is really is an acknowledgement that this coronavirus hasn't gone away. The first time I came on this program, I told you, at the end of the day, the eviction process requires people to pile into a courtroom, meet face to face, litigate cases, and that unnecessarily exposes people to the virus. And what the legislature and the courts are saying is, well, we're not going to just allow that to happen. Even in, at some level, they're able to conference cases, they're able to hold some Zoom conferences or phone conferences or something like that, but you can't redo the entire housing court system the way we know it. So you might just have to kind of just wait this out. So it's going to be May or even later, maybe for some landlords, August, September, before you start to see these evictions pick up.
Yeah, but we talked about the whole going virtual component. I mean, there are some arbitrations that are being handled virtually. And if we're looking at May, again, let's go back to the conversation we had last time. Aren't we facing a potential huge backlog in our court system?
It's going to be an incredible backlog. These cases aren't going anywhere. In fact, some landlords have a decision to make about whether or not they just want to pursue money judgments in civil court as opposed to waiting for the housing courts to open. So if you got to remember, if under New York law existing right now, if you want to evict a tenant for a holdover where the lease is up and the tenant's been there more than 2 years, you have to serve already a 90-day notice, and you would serve that with the hardship declaration form. And you're talking about your action being stayed at least until May 1 if that hardship declaration form is filled out. Cases were already new cases being put on the calendar in March and in April. If we're waiting to May to actually bring those cases, because right now, at least for the next 60 days, the court isn't accepting cases unless it's a nuisance or some narrow circumstance where the landlord complied with the new legislation. So you're really talking about September, October 2022 when a lot of these cases start to pick up.
Yeah. As a lawyer yourself, talk to us about how this impacts you, the work that you do. I mean, given the fact that we've got these new moratoriums and the extension now in place, how does this affect lawyers in the courtroom?
Well, we're not going to court so much. That's number one reason why it's affecting us. With a lot of my commercial tenants, I'm working with them to find settlement resolutions. So putting some of the payments a little later in the second year of the lease, third year of the lease, on towards the back or further end of the lease, or abating some of the month's rent, where if you had a restaurant and you've been shut down and you're not making any money, well, maybe the landlord can take a haircut or can fully abate a portion of the rent for the period that the government said you couldn't operate. The legislature hasn't done much, if anything, for the commercial tenants. So those processes are still moving forward, albeit at a pretty slow pace. So, for example, where I am situated in Nassau County, new holdover cases are getting March and April return dates. In the Bronx, I've had some cases that were commenced over the summer start to make appearances, start to have settlement conferences, and those cases are moving through the system. But the legislature meets starting in January. Maybe they'll have something prescribed for the commercial tenants. Right now, they haven't done anything.
So we talk about settlements. I mean, obviously you said settlement conferences, that started in September. We're now in July. And so if you're on the commercial side, you can potentially see yourself having to wait for months with the tenant right there, not paying rent, and still have to wait this out in a long period of time.
Right. The best thing you can do is reach out to your tenant if you're a landlord, a commercial landlord, or a residential landlord, and try to work something out that works for both sides, particularly if that tenant has been a long-standing tenant and is someone who you expect, when things open up, can pay the rent and stay there for a long time and continue to be a good tenant. Now, if you don't have a good working relationship and the pandemic, it's just, compounded that, well, then you have a decision to make about whether you want to go through the eviction process. But what we're doing right now, most of the lawyers I know that working on both ends are trying to resolve these cases. And because at the end of the day, if I'm evicting a tenant, particularly a commercial tenant, who am I going to get in to take that tenant's place? I mean, or, if I do get someone in to take that tenant's place, what is going to be the rent? How much of a hit on a month-to-month basis am I going to take, and how long is it going to take to lease that space? So we have some difficult decisions. It's really got to be done on a case-by-case basis with you and your business managers and your attorneys. If you're a residential landlord or residential tenant, you got to think about how you're going to pay your expenses and come to these determinations as well with your trusted advisors and attorneys.
Yeah. And so with the new legislation, or I should say the new extension on the moratorium whatsoever, what else do you view as potentially problematic for you guys?
Well, don't worry about us. We'll be okay. I mean, lawyers, we keep busy. We find something to do. But with respect to, these new laws, every single time you come up with a new law, and you're going to have tenants attorneys that interpret it one way, you're going to have landlords attorneys that interpret it another way, you're going to have downstate judges who see the law one way, you're going to have upstate judges who see the law another way. So there's going to be a lot of litigation created by these new laws, and they'll go to the appellate division. And then a year from now, 2 years from now, or the appellate term in the case of housing court, and you'll see determinations start to come down about what these laws actually mean, the fine points of the law. So that's really going to take a long time to shake out. Actually, the the Emergency Eviction and Foreclosure Prevention Act sunsets in May. So the cases that are brought after May won't have to comply. And what you probably will see is a lot of landlords saying, you know what, I don't want the headache of even complying with this. I'm just going to wait until May and see what happens.
Back up for a minute, because you said to me you just said a few seconds ago, it could go to the appellate court. The appellate court could take about a year. I mean, if you're battling with the tenant, going back and forth, and you're trying to get that eviction, that literally means the tenant could actually be in the building for almost a year and nothing can be done if you're the landlord?
Well, there's things that can be done. So if I were the landlord's attorney and the tenant brought an issue to the appellate term or to the appellate division, what you would want to say is, listen, you're going to stay this case, but I want some payment while, like a bond posted, just to kind of protect, both sides and maintain the status quo. So you would ask for a bond to be posted which wouldn't probably be granted in the landlord context, in the residential context, but would probably be granted in most scenarios in the commercial context. So if I represent a large restaurant and I'm 10 months past due on my rent, and the landlord has this case pending, and there's this appealable issue that is ripe for the appellate term or the appellate division to decide. Well, if I'm the landlord attorney, I'm going to say, okay, I understand that you have to do this, but in the meantime, they should be paying rent or use and occupancy into court or posting a bond, just so that I'm not left holding the bag after an additional year. So there are some remedies. Another reason why it's good to speak to an attorney about these, fact-specific scenarios.
Well, that's why we're speaking to the attorney right now. And we thank you for joining us here on Open, giving us this information, obviously, for landlords and for tenants. A lot of people will be paying attention to what's going to happen in the upcoming months. But with it moving to May, certainly a lot of eyes will be paying attention to see exactly how this all plays out. And you know what that means for you. We'll be calling you back again. Thanks so much for joining us.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Daren.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know now, if you want more information, be sure to stay tuned to us here on Open. We also want to let you know, too, if you want to find out more information in regards to Robert, you can visit his website, dagallp.com. Once again, dagallp.com. Want you to stay with us. We've got more Open coming up. We'll be right back right after this. And we thank you for staying with us. Individuals tend to face challenges when returning to their communities after incarceration and often require additional support to find and maintain employment. As the country's largest reentry employment organization, the Center for Employment Opportunities provides immediate, effective, and comprehensive employment services to individuals who have recently returned from incarceration. CEO offers individuals coming home from prison the ongoing support necessary to build capital as well as some financial stability. Joining us now to share more is the communications manager at the Center for Employment Opportunities, Jovanni Ortiz. And we're thanking you so much, Jovanni, for being here with us, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. A very important topic to talk about, because when we talk about people who come home from incarceration, we know that some of the biggest challenges that they face are being able to have, financial stability and a job. I imagine with COVID-19, the way that it's impacted so many people, that now has become even harder for you. So can you share with us a little bit about the work and how even COVID-19 has created possibly an additional impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so happy to be here to talk about this topic and the work that we're doing, because it's super important. So just to give you a little bit of background on the Center for Employment Opportunities, CEO for short, we began in the 1970s as a demonstration project of the Vera Institute of Justice, which is an organization that still exists and is dedicated to criminal justice reform. And then in 1996, we actually became an independent nonprofit organization. And we've grown quite a bit since then. We're headquartered in New York City in Manhattan, but we currently have 30 sites across 10 states. So we're spread out all over the country. Obviously, one of our sites being in the Bronx. It's one of our busiest sites as well. And you know, it's been a tough year for many organizations in many different fields. COVID-19 has impacted us all in one way or another. But the impact on those who are coming home from incarceration has been that much greater. And the reason for that is people who are trying to re-enter society and the workforce often enter or they deal with a substantial barrier. They're dealing with discrimination in some cases. They're dealing with you know, a lack of opportunity, and that is because there are many who believe that, you know, these people who are coming home will not be able to contribute in the same way as someone else, which is, you know, obviously something that is incorrect and not true. So, you know, as they're re-entering society, as they're trying to get back in, that's where we step in and we try to help them. But because of the barriers that they face already in normal times, COVID-19 has just magnified those barriers, because there are a bunch of people who have, you know, either lost a previous employment or are looking for new jobs. And there are many companies that have closed down or at least have frozen hiring because of the pandemic. So the barriers, as I mentioned, that they're already experiencing, those who are coming home, are that much worse during the pandemic.
Yeah. Can you give us an estimate as to, when you talk about reducing recidivism, give us a little estimate as to how much is that important time frame between the time a person comes home and, you know, potentially finding that work? You know, we know that if you don't find work within a certain time, there's some potential pitfalls that could possibly occur. Do you have a projected timeline of that we ought to try to be able to find something within this? Because if not, otherwise this would be problematic.
Yeah, it's a great question, Daren. And the way that you know, the way our program works is there are a lot of different organizations that do similar reentry work, but the way our program works is that as people enter our program, we're actually paying them to go through the training process. So just to give you a little bit idea of our model, it starts with job readiness training and P2E, which stands for Pathway to Employment. As they're actually in that training program, even if they're not working yet, they're just in the training program, we're compensating them. We're making sure that they have some sort of income, because we know as they come home, in many cases, they have very little to no savings. They need to live, they need to be able to thrive, especially in certain areas like New York, where it's pretty costly to live. They have to have some sort of income. So they're trying to do the right thing. They're entering our training program, but they're not able to work yet. So we want to make sure that they have some compensation. After they complete the training, they're going to pay transitional work, where they're actually working in a job and transitioning into the workforce, figuring out, you know, kind of getting their bearings and figuring out maybe what they want to do and how it's like being in the workforce again. And they're obviously being paid during that time. They also will have the opportunity then to meet with a job coach at CEO who will help them, you know, secure employment, you know, permanent employment as they complete their transitional work. And we also pair them with retention specialists who will work with them to make sure that they're doing all that they can to actually keep the job, right, and move up in the job if that's something that they're interested in. So the process happens pretty quickly. And the reason is, you know, as people come home, if they don't have any way of collecting some sort of income, in many cases, they recidivate and they return to whatever crime it was, maybe that was producing an income for them. And that's unfortunate, but it's almost like they don't have any other choice, because again, you know, you can't really survive without having any sort of financial support. So if they don't have a job or the resources at least to re-enter the workforce and attempt to re-enter the workforce and make an income again, they often have no choice but to recidivate. And then they end up in many cases being, you know, reprimanded by their parole or probation officer or rearrested and put back into the system. So it's sort of a cycle that goes on. And that's the goal of our organization, is to step in before that happens and get them on the straight and narrow path.
Yeah. So in a time like this, what is, you know, we talk about organizations such as yourself that are really helping the prison population. What can you tell us, and what can you fill us in with regards to how things are at present in terms of the workforce? Because obviously a lot of people aren't hiring given what's going on.
Yeah, it's been tough. We've been fortunate to keep our services going throughout the entire pandemic. We never really had to stop. We just had to adjust. And obviously a lot of that is virtual for our job coaches and retention specialists that often meet in person, it was a little bit difficult adjusting, but the goal for us was to not stop our services because we knew there was a need, and in some cases, a growing need. For example, in New York, the Governor Cuomo, had expedited the release of a number of individuals due to the pandemic and due to the risk that they had by being incarcerated. Remaining incarcerated posed a greater risk to them health-wise. So he expedited the release of a number of incarcerated individuals, many of whom would come to programs like ours because they needed to make some money and re-enter the workforce. And they wanted to. They wanted, in many cases, to become productive members of society. They're not looking to go back in, to incarceration. It's something they would like to try to avoid at all costs. With that being said, there was, if anything, an increase in the need for our services. But as you mentioned, the workforce became more difficult because of so many organizations closing, especially in New York City, quarantining and the lockdowns, that we had briefly, made it super difficult for a lot of organizations, especially, look at the restaurant industry. They're still, facing a strong impact. So I say that because, it was difficult. It was difficult for us, but it was important for us to also not lose the momentum and really still try to continue placing people. And I will say, with all of those organizations that maybe either closed down or postponed hiring, there were also a number that reached out to us because there was an additional need for support. For example, in New York City, the court system didn't have enough people to actually help with the sanitizing process, in those buildings. And they actually reached out to us for additional support. Another example of that is NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, who we already had partnered with in many instances. They needed some additional support actually delivering food to some of their residents who weren't able to leave to go purchase for themselves. So they reached out to CEO, and we were able to set them up with some additional crews who could safely do that work.
A lot of great work that you guys continue to do. As you look to 2021 real quickly, before we go, share with us a little bit about your plans and how you see things playing out.
We had a vision for 2020, and obviously that changed a little bit unexpectedly, and I think that was the case for everyone. So
Right.
with 2021, we're ready for whatever comes our way, but we want to continue this work. We want to continue to grow our services. We definitely continue to expand our program. We're going to be opening in Atlanta soon enough, in Georgia, which will be our first location in that state. And the reason that we continue to expand and enter new territories is because we know that there's a need for our services. We don't just go anywhere just for the heck of it. We go because there's a need for our services and there are people coming home who need assistance. We recently opened in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have a few locations in California that recently opened, and we're going to continue to expand. One of the things I'll quickly mention to you is our Returning Citizen Stimulus Program that was founded by us because of the pandemic. And the Returning Citizen Stimulus Program is a stimulus program that is directly for those who are coming home from incarceration. So anybody who came home from prison or jail during the time of the pandemic, since about April 2020, would receive a stimulus check if they applied for it and were qualified. And since that program launched, which was in April, now we're in January, we've given out more than $20 million in funds and over 10,000 payments. And again, what's unique about that program is, unlike the federal stimulus that's provided by the government, this was specifically for people coming home from incarceration. So even if they could not get into our program, even if they weren't a CEO participant, we were still able to help them with some stimulus money. So that was one thing that we're doing. And we're going to continue to do that through 2021 until the need is no longer there.
Well, Jovanni, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for giving us a little bit of insight into the work that's going on, and very vital work and much needed population that needs to be dealt with and really served. And so thanks for doing the work that you're doing, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get back with you soon.
Thanks for having me. This was great. Appreciate it.
All righty. Well, we want to let our viewers know for more information, please visit their website at ceoworks.org. Once again, it's ceoworks.org. And then also you can follow them on social media at CEO Works. We encourage you, don't go anywhere. We do have more show coming up. We'll be right back right after this. And welcome back to the show. The New York City Veterans Alliance is a member-driven grassroots policy advocacy and community building organization that's advancing veterans and families as civic leaders in New York City and beyond. As the leading advocacy voice for veterans and families in New York City, their mission is to empower veterans, families, and civilian allies to connect as a community, advocate for improved policies, and then also to advance as civic leaders. Here now to share with us a little bit more is the Deputy Director of the New York City Veterans Alliance, James Fitzgerald. And James, good to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, good to have you and Happy New Year to you. Listen, let's talk about veterans. I mean, as we talk about the year 2021 and service, you guys really do a great job of advocating for veterans and veteran services. But for somebody who may not be so familiar, give us a little bit of insight into some of the present needs that veterans have.
So, the present needs of our veteran community are not too dissimilar from the present needs of our society as a whole. Our veteran community are still struggling with mental health issues that need to be addressed. Luckily, we have a Veterans Administration that is there to take a hold of some of these issues. But when it comes to the impacts of the COVID pandemic, food insecurity is number one on that list of things that the veteran community is looking for to improve and to have more resources that are sustained. We need a lot of these resources to stay around to ensure that not only is the present day going to be good, but like tomorrow can be even better for us. And these resources are vital to our veteran families in New York City. So number one is going to be food insecurity. A very close second is going to be housing. Housing in New York City has always been rough. And for our veteran community, it's a little bit more complex because even though we have resources like a VA loan, with a lot of the co-ops being in New York City, I want to say there's more co-ops in New York City than in any other city in the country. The VA loan doesn't apply to that currently. So it makes our situation a little bit more complex, trying to apply the veteran benefits that we have to the city that we live in. So housing is continuously going to be evolving. But we have to look at affordable housing for our veteran community. A lot of us are in positions where, these affordable housing units are still outside of our reach. So making sure that New York City can provide affordable housing, not just for, our veteran community, but for all citizens of New York City.
Yeah. When we talk about New York City, one of the first things that comes to mind between the city and the state is the impending budget. We know the budget cuts have actually affected many service organizations, particularly we know veterans have also been impacted as well. Any concern, given the fact that COVID-19, we know there's a shortage of funds and also a shortage of services. What's your concern, given the fact of the impending budget and the potential for potential budget cuts?
Unfortunately, I sound like a broken record when I say this, but it still remains true. We still need more money. We still need more resources. We still need more attention placed on the issues that are affecting our veteran community now. Here in New York City, our Department of Veteran Services budget was not decreased, but rather saw an increase. But at the same time, the pandemic has caused a greater need and a need for a larger budget. So I'm still going to be on a position that I'm glad to see the increase. I'm glad that there wasn't cuts to our Department of Veteran Services. But what I will say also is we need more. There's so much more potential that needs to be put into our Department of Veteran Services in order to impact the close to 210,000 veterans that reside in this area. This is an area that encompasses at least 1/4 of our state's veterans. So to make sure that we're able to, accurately and properly provide services to this growing community is something that is a priority of not only NYC Veterans Alliance, but should be a priority of, the mayor and also every government agency out there that can provide services to New York City citizens.
Give me a little bit about government agencies and elected officials. What kind of response are you getting from them? What are you hearing from them, understanding the crisis that we're in?
I think 2020 provided us with a very unprecedented time, and everyone was trying to do their best given the obstacles that were placed in front of all of us. I'm going to, ring a little bit of praise for our elected officials here in New York City. They were doing what they could, but there's still so much more that was needed. What I would say on the ground, it was a slowed response that kind of put a lot of our veteran families in a position of not knowing where to turn. NYC Veterans Alliance, we stood up a Veterans Mutual Aid program to ensure that not only those seams and gaps were filled in for our veteran families, but there was an on-the-ground grassroots response to everything that was happening during the pandemic. It's hard for these government agencies and some of the offices of these elected officials to, kind of turn on a dime and focus their efforts in the same way that we were able to, but that's what was necessary. It took a little bit longer for our government agencies, but at the same time, I'm excited to, look at the synergy that's come about from, the pandemic. And, not only are we reaching out to elected officials' offices in order to handle the situations that come up with our veteran community, they're doing that same thing vice versa. So the communication has increased between nonprofits and community leaders with our elected officials, but also our government agencies. So that has been an improvement. But at the same time, there's so much work left to be done. There's so much more coordination that needs to be solidified between our elected officials, our government agencies, and nonprofits like us that are on the ground providing these services.
Yeah. One of the big issues affecting New York City is that of homelessness. Can you give us a little bit of insight into veteran homelessness? Because we know that there are a lot of those people who've been impacted, and a lot of people sometimes who we actually see out there sometimes are veterans.
Absolutely. So when it comes to our homelessness problem, of course, like we have, quite the issue here in New York City, but like when it comes to our veteran community, veterans are disproportionately affected by homelessness. So we have homelessness rates that are slightly higher than the general population. And, here in New York, like we have situations. I'll say one of the clients that, we were able to help, one of our veterans, was an Air Force veteran that had, served his country for several years, continued to serve working at the VA when he got out. But when the pandemic hit, he was placed in a position in which he was failed by many of the government agencies that were tasked to assist with getting him connected to affordable housing. So it was just one of those examples of that veteran falling through the cracks and not knowing where to turn until he found us. And like, we were able to get this veteran into a hotel until we got some things situated for him to get placed into affordable housing. But that situation is still ongoing, as with many veterans. And I think that that should be the focus is, you know, what can we do in the here and now to ensure that every single one of our veterans that reside in New York City has a place to lay their head down? I think at a bare minimum, that's the service, that's the, you know, thank you that we can provide for each one of these men and women providing a service to our country, is to say, we're going to make sure that you have a place to lay your head down at night. And like, those are the situations that we truly have to get a grapple on. And for us, it's just being on the ground, making sure that they always have some place to turn, whether it be an organization or another veteran that's able to understand how the system works and how they can best be connected to the resources they need to make it through.
It's still hard and it's unfathomable for me to imagine that you serve your country, but yet and still can't find a place to live for the country that you went out to go and serve. I've always wrestled with that. And to hear the amount of people who are actually struggling, homeless, and, you know, sometimes you even see them outside cardboard boxes with hats, saying that they serve the country. I just feel like we got to do better.
Absolutely. And like that is like the continual like mantra that I, you know, continue to sing is like, we have to do better and be better. Like, you know, our debt to our nation's veterans is, you know, wide ranging. Like, we owe them so much. I'm a veteran myself. And it's a pleasure for me to, you know, come back and serve, you know, our community again. But it's also, you know, very disheartening to see how many veterans have been impacted and how many have been pushed to the side and aren't that priority that they should be on the local, state, and federal government when it comes to providing resources to our community.
Well, we got to leave it there, but I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us. But before we go, if people want to find out more information, how do they go about finding out more information?
So if you'd like to find out how to get assistance through our Veteran Mutual Aid program, you can definitely go to ourveterans.nyc. There you can click to request help. If you'd like to keep up with what's going on in the veteran community and what resources are available to you, definitely go to nycveteransalliance.org. Or you can always follow us on social media. So get on that Twitter machine and find us at NY Vets Alliance. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you want to stay in the know, that's definitely how you connect with us.
Yeah. James Fitzgerald, thank you so much for being with us. We got to leave it there, but thank you for your service to this country, and thank you for the service that you're doing for veterans, even in a time like this. Thanks much.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, to reiterate, if you want to get more information about the New York City Veterans Alliance, once again, they've got a website, nycveteransalliance.org, and also follow them on Twitter at NYC Vets Alliance. Well, we come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us, but most of all, I want to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the Recablecast on Optimum's Channel 67, Verizon Files Channel 2133, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. For all of us here at Open, as we start off and open up New Year 2021, we're looking for a great year, looking for great blessings, looking for peace, joy, happiness, and yes, an end to the virus and this vaccine coming forward. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, but most of all, keep this channel wide open.